Let's dive right into this explainer and tackle what is, honestly, one of the absolute most stressful parts of renting, making sure you actually get your money back when you move out. If you've ever rented a property, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You spent days packing, lugging boxes, coordinating all the logistics. You are physically exhausted. And then, right there at the finish line, hanging over your head, is your security deposit. It's a massive chunk of your hard-earned cash, and trying to recover it can feel, well, completely out of your control. But it really doesn't have to be.
Will I get my deposit back? It's the million-dollar question we all ask ourselves while taping up those boxes. You end up staring at some random scuff on the floorboard or a weird shadow on the ceiling, just sweating it, thinking, oh man, is that going to cost me? Well, today, we are turning that anxiety into a rock-solid action plan. We're looking at the hard data and the actual guidelines around tenant rights so you have the exact knowledge you need to confidently reclaim what is rightfully yours.
So we're going to break this down into 5 quick steps: the deposit dilemma, your physical move-out checklist, understanding fair wear and tear, government scheme protection, and finally, how to set yourself up for stress-free renting in the future. Section 1, the deposit dilemma, facing the move-out reality. Let's start with the immediate challenge you run into the second you hand back those keys.
The absolute crucial point here is that being proactive is literally the only way to protect yourself from unfair, unnecessary charges from a landlord. Think about it. The end of a tenancy is essentially a transition of power. If you just hand over the keys and walk away hoping for the best, you are leaving your money entirely up to someone else's totally subjective opinion. You can't treat this as an afterthought. You've got to approach it as an active strategy to protect your financial assets. Preparing for that move-out inspection actually starts way before the moving truck even shows up.
Which brings us to your move-out checklist and the physical labor of moving. We're looking at 3 concrete, non-negotiable actions you absolutely must take before you lock that door for the last time. First up, check the inventory. Dig out that original move-in report you got on day 1 and compare the property line by line. That right there is your baseline reality. Second, clean thoroughly, and I mean to a professional standard. The oven, the carpets, the bathrooms, they need to look just like they did when you first arrived. And finally, number 3, take photos. Take so many photos. You want clear, date-stamped evidence taken right before you hand over the keys. It is your undeniable proof. If any dispute pops up later, I promise you those photos are going to be your absolute best friends. Okay, part 3, fair wear and tear, knowing your legal rights. We really need to slow things down right here, because we're diving into the absolute most contested concept in all of renting. Seriously, this is where almost all deposit disputes happen. Simply put, a lived-in home ages, and the law actually recognizes that everyday, reasonable use over time is going to naturally wear down certain elements of the property. I mean, think about it. Gravity works, the sun shines, people walk. You aren't living in a museum suspended in midair, right? Walking across a floor day after day, opening and closing doors, sunlight hitting the living room paint over 12 or 24 months, that creates unavoidable, totally natural changes to the space. And there is a massive, distinct contrast between normal aging and actual damage. Let's look at some relatable examples. On one hand, if you've been walking the exact same path from your bedroom to the kitchen every single morning to get coffee, those carpet fibers are gonna flatten out. The paint might fade a little bit behind a really sunny window. That is classic fair wear and tear. You cannot be penalized for simply existing in a space. But on the other hand, if you knock over a huge glass of red wine onto that rug, or accidentally punch a fist-sized hole in the drywall while trying to pivot a heavy couch, okay, that crosses the line. That is actual damage that requires real repair or replacement. And here is your ultimate legal shield. Landlords simply cannot legally deduct money from your deposit for these natural signs of aging. They just can't. They cannot use your hard-earned deposit to fund a fancy renovation or to replace an older, slightly flattened carpet with a brand new one just because it looks a bit lived in. Really understanding this boundary, that's exactly how you successfully push back against unreasonable deduction requests.
Moving on to step 4, government scheme protection. This is your financial safety net, and really the final pillar of your protection strategy.
If you happen to be renting in the UK, your absolute best defense is making sure your money was legally placed in an official government-backed tenancy deposit protection scheme, usually just called a TDP. This is so critical. By law, your landlord has to protect your deposit using one of these schemes. And why does this actually matter to you? Because the scheme acts as a totally impartial referee. If you and your landlord disagree about, say, those faded walls versus a red wine stain, the landlord doesn't just get to keep your money by default. No way.
The TDP provides an official, completely free dispute resolution service. They'll look at your move-in inventory, they'll look at all those date-stamped photos you so wisely took on move-out day, and they make a fair, legally binding decision based purely on the evidence.
Finally, Section 5, Stress-Free Future Renting. Let's upgrade your next move. Now that you've totally mastered the exit strategy, let's make sure your next renting experience is infinitely better right from day one.
This brings us to platforms like Roomero. Using a service like Roomero.co.uk in the UK connects you directly with verified properties and genuinely reliable landlords. It makes the entire renting process, literally from the day you move in to the day you eventually move out, smooth, transparent, and completely stress-free. When you start your journey on a trusted platform, you are dramatically reducing the chances of dealing with nightmare deposit disputes down the line, simply because you're dealing with verified professionals right out of the gate.
With your deposit safely secured and a rock-solid strategy in place for your next search, the whole power dynamic has shifted. You aren't at the mercy of the move-out process anymore. You are the one entirely in control. So ask yourself, now that you know exactly how to wield your tenant rights and protect your money, what kind of space will you confidently call home next?